Hello, I'm Shelley Blanton-Stroud, welcoming you to the Mystery Review Crew, Story Behind the Story. Author Carmen Amato is a retired Central Intelligence Agency officer and an award-winning mystery and thriller author. With experience as the head of a U.S. National Intelligence Tradecraft School, Carmen also led an intelligence collection program responsible for the Western Hemisphere. She has received the National Intelligence Award and the Career Intelligence Medal in recognition of her contributions to the field. Drawing on her extensive background in counter-drug and espionage operations, Carmen has written the Detective Amelia Cruz Police series, featuring the first female police detective in Acapulco, Mexico. This series explores the complex issues of cartel activity, corruption, and social inequalities in Mexico. It has won the Poison Cup Award for Outstanding Series from Crime Masters of America in 2019 and 2020, and has been optioned for television. Carmen's fiction career was inspired by her own experience in Mexico and Central America. Additionally, she has a BA in History and Political Science from Le Moyne College, as well as a master's in international relations from the University of Virginia. She also holds certificates of completion from Institut Catholique in Paris, France, and Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Apart from being an accomplished author, Carmen comes from a family with a very interesting history that includes a mayor, a Mensa genius, and a great-grandfather who committed the first homicide in the state of Connecticut with an automatic weapon, but was never brought to justice. Welcome to Story Behind the Story, Carmen. I have to say on our readers' behalf that I couldn't help being really intrigued by your mention of your great-grandfather on your website. Would you mind starting our conversation by telling us a little bit about that personal history?
Well, that's definitely the way to jump into my background. You're talking about Giuseppe Amato and the Great Amato family murder mystery. My great-grandfather, Giuseppe, was an Italian immigrant from Calabria. And in 1912, in Hartford, Connecticut, in a tenement, he killed his neighbor, his wife, and shot the neighbor's wife as well. He had a barber shop, he sold it, and bought an automatic handgun. We're not sure what the issue was, why he decided he would do this, but it was the first murder in the state of Connecticut with an automatic handgun. After the shooting, his mortally wounded wife and the neighbor's wife ran out after him. He made a getaway. There was a big manhunt, but he was never seen again, and nobody knows really what happened to him. My grandmother, who was about 5 at the time, always maintained that her parents went back to Italy and died in a train crash. So no one knew about this for years and years and years, until my sister was doing some genealogical research and tried to find death certificates and was directed to the police in Hartford, Connecticut. They hold all death certificates for murder victims. That's how we found it.
Wow. And where were you in your life cycle when you learned this, when you and your sister learned this?
I was an adult already, on my second career as a writer. So, yeah. And it was a big surprise.
Did it change family lore? Did your family change its vision of who they were? Or do you think that other members of the family did know?
No, no one knew. It was a big surprise to everybody. No one knew at all. I'm not sure it changed family lore because she had never really talked very much about her parents she was raised by an aunt and uncle and married off to my grandfather in an arranged marriage. So nobody really talked about her parents. So this filled in the gap, frankly.
Does that kind of thing, to learn about that when you're already a writer, a working writer, does it alter or influence your feelings about family relations in family history in your characterization?
That didn't make a big difference to me as I was writing, although I think it made some interesting reading for people on my website. But my grandfather would be the son-in-law of the murdering Giuseppe. My grandfather was a sheriff, a deputy sheriff of Oneida County, New York, during Prohibition. And it was his stories that ultimately led me to my latest project, which is the Galliano Club series. So he had some great stories about being assigned to go to the cemetery because bootleggers had conducted a mock funeral and buried bootleg. And they thought they'd come back to dig it up and cart it away. And he didn't want to go by himself. And he asked his best friend, who was an insurance salesman, to come with him. And they hid out in the cemetery for 10 or 15 minutes. It was a cold night. And they left. My grandfather figured if the bootleggers were coming back, they were welcome to the stuff. It was too creepy to stay.
Oh my.
Yes, I used that in a book.
In my first book, I used a story my dad always used to tell about a terrible thing that happened to him as a child. And I altered it radically because it was fiction. I just used the core parts of it. He gave me my favorite compliment ever as a writer, which was, that wasn't what happened, but it's the truth. And so that's sort of what I was aiming for, to find the parts of it that were like emotionally important and psychologically important, and turn him into a girl and all kinds of other things. But I mean, I don't know how it would be possible to be a writer without thinking about the people you've known in your own life, and letting them at least pass before your eyes while you're writing. Is that true for you?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely during the pandemic, I mined my family for interesting ideas. But I'm not interested in writing fictional memoir. That's inspiration that mixes with everything else in your head and ultimately comes out in the form of a fun story.
I think then we really need to sort of turn a left here and make sure our viewers know about your 30-year career before your career as an author. You were in the CIA for 30 years. Could you tell us a little bit about that chapter of your life?
You're right. I was in the agency for 30 years. I got recruited out of graduate school at the University of Virginia and was recruited as an all-source analyst, which is the position where you sit at the nexus of different different streams of intelligence, whether that's human intelligence or signals intelligence or publicly available open source content. And you've got to make sense of it. And that's your job, to draw the conclusions, polish the prose, and ultimately make that in a report to policymakers. So I came on board the day after Reagan's second inauguration. There was a very big expansion going on. of intelligence community at that time, and I came in that wave. So I was an all-source analyst for 5 years, and then I moved into positions that I would describe as technical adjacent. I'm not an engineer, but these are positions in which I worked on issues like machine translation and speech to text. Before there was Google Translate on your desktop, and all people were inventing that and experimenting with it and assessing it. And so one of the more interesting jobs I had was assessing signals intelligence content. And this was in conjunction with the National Security Agency. And we looked at different signals intelligence reporting and had to make some decisions about what to keep and what was no longer useful.
I'm not entirely sure what the signals reporting means.
SIGINT, signals intelligence. So that would be intercepted communications. But our job ended up assessing content that ended up being pivotal after 9/11. One of the more interesting positions that I had. And then the last position I had before retiring was as head of one of the intelligence tradecraft schools.
In the work that you have done with the agency, it seems like a really natural fit with an author's work. If what you're doing is taking pieces of evidence, documents, letters, emails, transcripts of phone calls, and figuring out how to stitch them all together to make meaning. Do you think that makes your life as an author sort of more natural for you, all those decades of doing work like that?
I think in any position that I had, whether it was as my, initiation position as an all-source analyst, which was a great place to learn about intelligence, learn about the different ways information is collected, and what is national security issues, rather than, it's of interest to everybody. I think that was a great starter position for me. But in every position subsequent, being able to communicate in written form as well as in making presentations or speaking to a group, that was all very important. And you had to be able to do it on demand. There was no waiting for the muse. Bad things happening in your country that you're assigned to cover, you've got to be able to write quickly, succinctly, and when it is needed. So all of that, that was 30 years of writing exercise, of having to write what I needed, and in different forms, because there are different publications, there's different styles of memos, etc. So that was a very good training ground.
So do you have a couple of books handy so you could show our viewers what those series look like so they'll recognize it, and then we'll talk more about them?
I do want to start showing you The Hidden Light of Mexico City, which is a political thriller, and it was the first book that I published. And Literary Fiction Review called it enthralling political drama. It's one of my favorite reviews, of course. The Galliano Club, as you mentioned, is very much inspired by my family, by my grandfather, who was the deputy sheriff. This is the prequel, Road to the Galliano Club. And the first full novel is Murder at the Galliano Club. There's a theme here. The next one is blackmail, and the last one is revenge. So, the Detective Amelia Cruz series, she is the first female police detective in Acapulco. I spent a lot of time in Mexico and Central America, so the themes of cartel, corruption, machismo are things I learned about, and they are the core challenges she faces. So these covers, which are by Matt Chase, this is the first book in the series, Cliff Diver. And if there is ever a television show, I think it should be called Cliff Diver. But this is one of my favorite covers that he did, Pacific Reaper. And the most recent book in that series is Narco Noir.
Those are gorgeous covers, truly gorgeous. They're so evocative, and they would definitely draw my eye in a bookstore. So tell us about Detective Amelia Cruz.
Amelia is, let's say, she's the first female police detective in Acapulco. She's a native of Acapulco. She came up through the ranks. She was a beat cop, and she competed for a detective slot. And I actually wrote that in a short story called The Beast, which was published by Huffington Post's Fiction 50 showcase that was curated by Rita Wilson.
Oh,
that was
wow.
Very exciting. You can also get it free on my website. She is living in a pressure cooker, frankly. She's got the inherent drug crime that is sweeping Acapulco, which has now become one of the most violent cities in the Western Hemisphere, because it is an entry point for the Chinese chemicals that make up fentanyl. And you've got the rival gangs, all affiliated with one cartel or another, fighting for that access point. So that's very easy to pull plots from current news. I don't have to make up serial killers. I can just read the news, and any day gives me 3 or 4 potential plots. So she is someone who has learned to fight. She's not a doormat, yet she's not a cartoon character either, because she's trying to have a career. She is also trying to have a personal life, and she has some family drama as well. So every book deals with the overarching crime plot. There's almost always a subplot, and then there's a personal plot. So these books are full of issues that you're going to see in the news, but also real humans. What's the human cost of these issues?
If we were to meet Detective Amelia Cruz, what would we think about her? How does she manifest in person? What does she seem like? And then what might be surprising to us about her?
I think that the surprising would be that she's an attractive woman. In Narco Noir, she's 32. She's been a cop since she was 18. So you would be surprised to see an attractive woman who she has a scar on one arm at this point, in just trying to be normal, until she's got to harden her heart and chase after the next criminal.
You know, when you said that the books, you mentioned cartels, you mentioned corruption, and you mentioned machismo, and you've been in the context of talking about it being set in Acapulco, which is really true. But I also wonder about how this dovetails with your work in the agency. You know, does this being sensitive to matters of machismo and how it presses on Amelia, Is that true of your own career? Did you have to protect your boundaries in some way or prop yourself up to be around a very male field?
It was a very male field when I joined the agency. I did have, I wouldn't say experience with systemic issues, but you did encounter some jerks now and then. And in the very first Detective Amelia Cruz book, Cliff Diver, a fellow cop says to her, "I'm going to make your life miserable till you quit." And she laughs and says, "Tell me something I don't know. You know, you've been a jerk." And frankly, that was verbatim a conversation I had with a colleague. And, you know, 6 months after that conversation, talk about irony, he left because his wife got a job elsewhere and he was the trailing spouse. And I thought, okay.
Justice.
Yeah, justice, you know. So that sort of thing happened. And yes, I used them in the book. But yeah, you write what you know.
You know, when you mentioned about the technical things and that you're not an engineer, it made me think about the writing that you're doing now. And I believe it was just maybe yesterday in the New York Times, there was a big article about a police technology conference. And I don't remember exactly where it was held. So all kinds of police agencies went, you know, overseas to this conference that was really illustrating all the products they could buy. And the technology was just kind of crazy. And I was wondering if you're especially drawn in your series to the technical side of things. I mean, here's this one item that appeared in that New York Times article was kind of laughable. It was like what do you call it? A Segway scooter that is has an AK-40 attached to it. I mean, it seems like, I don't know how practical that really would be for a police officer, but they were demonstrating, showing pictures of Starbucks coffee cups that were really recording devices and things like that. I don't know, in the Amelia series, are you drawn to the technical aspects of it too? Or does it tend to be more of the police procedural stuff that we are familiar with in other series?
I sprinkled in a little bit of things that I know of personally. And some of that has been the use of video and how she, in one book, is able to catalog video and use speech technology to search the video. And surveillance cameras have been useful. In fact, in the latest book, Narco Noir, it's a surveillance camera that captures the murder that she must solve, but of course doesn't show her the murderer's face. A little bit.
It strikes me just talking to you how I've always been kind of interested in, I like novels that are about work, and I like to see the kind of work I'm not familiar with. And so maybe that's why my husband and I have been such great fans of BritBox TV shows set in England. Oh. And we'll always say, if we see someone on the street acting badly, we'll say, I hope they got that on CCTV. The idea that in a country, it seems like every block has a camera on it. And in my own work, which is more historical, it's interesting to me to go, oh, no, it was not easy to make that phone call. There needed to be a stop, then talk to the switchboard operator and ask for so-and-so. Then you wait for them to come on. And yet the switchboard operator might be listening, so that the technology of the day, of the culture, of the workplace actually has an effect on what will happen with the plot and with the characters.
Absolutely. I was reading Ian Rankin's last few books. And in every book of his, looking at the CCTV is the first step. And of course, not in Mexico. They don't have that type of blanket CCTV coverage. So I do get to play a little more fast and loose with some things in the Detective Amelia Cruz series. But I also have to make the reader understand that their legal system is not the same as ours. It's different. They don't have all of the same protections or procedures that we do. They don't have jury trial. The judge is the one with the power in that situation.
And you have said a key tenet of your series is corruption. So I could see how not having a jury might play into that plot-wise.
Yes, and corruption stems from all of the drug money that's washing through Mexico. If you were looking at the news, I think 3 weeks ago, the former Secretary of Public Security or Public Safety, he was convicted of a number of crimes in the U.S., but basically he took huge bribes from the Sinaloa cartel while he was Minister of Public Security.
Wow.
And he's at the top of the heap. Who was under him also getting money. It wasn't just him. And so all of that, I have to make the reader understand she's a good cop most of the time. Who else is a good cop with her or not? And how carefully does she have to walk because she doesn't know? She's living in a stew of, suspicion and paranoia.
I'm thinking how complicated it must be to create these plots. While, I know that you're working hard on your characterization of her also, but you've got to keep, not only do you have a through line with your plot, maybe the surface plot, but it seems to me that with the corruption part of it, there are many layers of plot you have to work on. It sounds terribly complicated. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process in order to get all this and have it work out right?
Well, I'm definitely a plotter. And my plots always start with some sticky notes. And I will use one color for one plot element. So I will start writing scenes on the sticky notes. I will arrange them on the wall, keep reorganizing until I have a nice color patchwork. You don't want all yellows, all pinks. And I try to arrange them in chronological order in columns. So the first week of the book might have 5 scenes. The second week might have 8 scenes, etc. And I will put that on a big sheet of drawing paper, put it up over the desk, and I'll get about a third of the way through that outline, and I'll have to rearrange. Plot needs some adjusting. So I'll probably rearrange at the 30% point and about 65%, and then all together. So once I've got all those building blocks in the proper order written down, then I'll smooth out the language, smoothing the language so it flows and it's fast and the reader is pulled along from one cliffhanger chapter to the next.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about your path to publication?
Well, I was still working full time when I was writing, and my first book, as I mentioned, was The Hidden Light of Mexico City, a political thriller, and one of my favorite covers.
Gorgeous.
But I was doing the querying thing and got some feedback about the book from a well-known author who was also at that time assisting me in finding an agent. And the response I was getting was, handle the book because it has so many Mexican characters. Now, this was a good 12 years before American Dirt came out. And she said, well, people are really looking for, what agents want to represent is Sex in the City. So be Candace Bushnell and give us that in Mexico. But that was not what I was writing. I was trying to show the lives of those in Mexico who are being affected by the violence, by the drug wars, and doing it through the venue of a thriller that was also like a Cinderella story. So that didn't work out. And then the next feedback I got was, well, this is really great book. This is terrific writing, but I don't know anybody who knows you, so I can't represent it. And given that, I'm working at the agency and anonymity is your friend, that wasn't going to change. So I decided to publish it independently, and it did better than I thought it would. It actually sold some copies to people I don't know. And I'd say that the Literary Fiction Review called it enthralling political drama, which thrilled me no end. And it actually, this book has legs because it was longlisted for the 2020 Millennium Book Award too.
That's great.
So I felt pretty good about the quality of book I was able to write and publish independently. So that when I was ready to publish Detective Amelia Cruz series, I just followed the same path that I had already forged with the thriller. And if you look at Amazon, the number of reviews and the ratings tell you that I'm doing something right here. So at this point, I feel very confident in how I can publish independently without having to wait for somebody to accept it and put their own opinions on what it should look like or what the cover should be.
I meet a lot of people who are writing after wildly successful first careers, and there seems to be a theme of competence, confidence, and a desire to control the product and not to let it get ruined by someone else's vision for it. And you seem to have quite a bit of an indie spirit in you, a confidence in your ability to make it what you want it to be.
I think, yeah, I would agree. I am happy with where I am in this publishing trajectory.
I'm not sure which book or the series has been optioned for television before. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
The Detective Amelia series has been optioned for television. It's actually been optioned 3 times. The first was a screenwriter, and the second was NBC Universal, and the third time was Latin World Entertainment. So still waiting for something to happen, for it to hit the screen.
I think the series, both of them, sounds amazing. I can't wait to dive in. And all that you take with you from your whole life in order to shape your life as an author, I find very inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us today at the Mystery Review Crew.
Thank you, Shelley. It's been a nice conversation.